The next diagram to focus on is the data flow diagram. This one's probably slightly alien to you. You'll have come across a flowchart before. The use case diagram was quite straightforward. A data flow diagram is concerned about the journey that the data takes, and I suppose the places and the people that the data touches, if you like, on its journey around the system. And again, it's looking at inputs and looking at outputs. Something slightly different with a data flow diagram is that it's going to show you about the files, the storage, the place where your data is going to be stored. So in your case, with your application, your data, when I'm talking about your data, we're talking about perhaps the bookings that are made. Those bookings need to be stored somewhere. So when a client, the student, puts in a search for Tuesday afternoon, it can look at a file, it can open the file, look at it and go, oh, it is free or it isn't free. So that file needs to be saved somewhere. Clearly it can't be on Justin's phone, it can't be on Justin's personal computer. Well, it could be if it was left on and was part of a server, but that's something that you'll be showing in this diagram, in addition to how the data flows around the system and the different data types that are going to flow around your application. So it's a way of visualizing that data flow. We're looking at a Gain and Sarson's type of chart. It doesn't matter, but that's what it is. There are different sorts of data flow diagrams, and there are also different levels of data flow diagrams. There's an overview diagram that we're not going to look at, and you would then click on the overview diagram, you click on one part of it, and then look at what that does. But because our system is a relatively small system, you're just going to create one data flow diagram for the entire thing to show the business process. There are other ways of showing this information, such as a class diagram, an object diagram, or an entity diagram, and any of those would be suitable for this purpose too. But you will need to produce a data handling diagram because I think it gives the right level of detail for what you need to show with your system. So it will show the people, the entities, the processes that take place, the files that are accessed, the data stores, the direction of flow, and the data that moves around the system and how they interact with each other. This is a data flow diagram that I made earlier, and you can see here that it's not dissimilar to a flowchart, different symbols and arranged in a different way, but fundamentally it's quite similar. So let's work from top left. We've got the customer, and you've got the search for table and time. On the right hand side, the bookings, that is a data store, a file. Then in the middle you've got making a booking. On the right hand side you've got the customer again. So entities can be repeated, data stores can be repeated. That's not the case with the flowchart, it is the case with the data flow diagram. And you can see what I have here is for the Cognautics grill booking system. So this is where you would book a table at a restaurant. So that just gives you an indication of what a data flow diagram will look like, the overview. Also from this, notice that the data is actually along the lines, and notice the arrowheads as well showing direction of flow. And unlike a flowchart, notice how data can travel backwards and forwards between different parts of the system. All right. In other words, the customer searches and the search returns something back to the customer saying yes or no. All right. But you're not showing the decisions in the way that you did with the flowchart earlier on. So may I make a plea to you? When you give me a diagram, please label it. Please tell me what it is. It just helps hugely. Right, let's go on to what this diagram is actually about and the different parts of it. So first of all, you can see the customer. This is an entity, same as a use case diagram. And for the purpose of your tasks, you've got Justin, the client, and you've got the customer, you've got the students. Then we look at a process. A process comes in a rounded rectangle, whereas the entity was in a square. And the processes are going to be the actions that take place, where are calculations involved, that process, input, process, output, the adding of things together. That's what a process is, and it's shown by a rounded rectangle with, notice, that horizontal line that runs about a third of the way down it. We move on, and you can see a data store or a file. this is where the booking would be saved, and this is the file that would be accessed to see if another slot was available. So that could be a web server, it could be a computer, doesn't matter what it is, but that's where the bookings are saved. That's important to incorporate here. If that isn't in your data flow diagram, then it doesn't work, because you're not saving any data, and you do need to save data, and you need to have data to consult on whether there's a slot free. Alright, then we've got the data itself. The data is written along the lines, and you can see that in this instance in the table booking system, you've got name and email. This would be a web-based system where you put in your name, your email, and you search for a date and a time. You can see the availability, see the bookings moving around, the dates and times moving around. In your book, in your Cambridge Technicals book, the textbook, there is one of these diagrams that's used for booking flights, I think. And again, that's very close to the sort of thing that you're going to be doing. Obviously, you'll need to adapt it, but it's got some ideas in there. Interestingly, in that particular diagram, there is no data store, so that should be in there, and it should be in yours as well. So here's the checklist. Make a list of the data that's going to move around the system. Break the data up into individual fields. So think about time, think about date, and think about email, just whatever you're collecting for your system. Make a list of the entities, the actors. That won't take you very long. Make a list of the data stores or files where the data will be stored, and that needs to be included. Make a list of the processes that take place. You'll have that from your previous diagrams that you've produced. It might help you to write a bit of a story first before you go about making one of these things about actually what happens in what order. But again, consulting your flowchart will help you hugely with that. But your flowchart doesn't necessarily help you when you're thinking about data being passed backwards and forwards between entities. Okay, make your diagram. I used Lucidchart to make mine, lucidchart.com. Same as Tom's Planner, you can make a free account which will give you access to the basic flowchart, to the basic data flow diagram symbols, and it's pretty straightforward to use. In fact, moving the arrows around is far more fun than it should be. And make sure you name your symbols, and make sure that you name your chart. And that's it, data flow diagram done and dusted.